was watching the USFL this weekend where they've mic'd up the players, which they probably should have done at home on Saturday. But it's not a great idea because they swear all the time, these American footballers. But unlike the NRL, where Sky apologise, they forget to apologise and just let them say whatever they want, which is brilliant.
Interesting, it's the BBC and the Challenge Cup that have done that in previous years. They've actually mic'd up the players, haven't they? That would have been good.
Ashton Sims became a star, didn't he?
Yeah.
And
somebody has to edit out all the swear words by half time.
Have you ever asked Louis to do that?
He could do that.
Yeah.
As he said, the prettiest looking water boy at the moment.
Is that a poll? Do we open it up to the public? Is Louis McCarthy Scarsby the prettiest water boy in rugby league? Let us know.
Is this our version of Derek and Clive when they were drunk? Oh, you won't know that reference. It's a cultural reference.
Well, I don't get it, I must admit.
No. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Did a parody, Derek and Clive, which was very funny.
Right.
Except they also did a couple of bootleg albums where they were recorded when they were absolutely paralytic, where there was very little content other than just a constant barrage of swearing. But at a certain point in time, they were cult listening.
Almost sounds like that's an end of season podcast, isn't it?
That was one of the words they said a lot on that.
Yes,
yeah,
possibly misheard.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's still my highlight of the season. Is going to, because you've been to a million season launches, you ask the same questions over and over again. You go to Cameron Smith, what's it like being a cult? That kind of thing.
I'm not sure what he just said there. But.
Oh, it's not as bad as listening to Robbie Hunter-Paul yesterday talking about decades, but in his accent he sounded like something completely different, which wasn't his fault. Certainly wasn't talking about anyone else on the panel on the BBC, who I thought were great this weekend. Right, should we? Jamie's asked us about the trial. We'll come up to the trial in a bit because it's all tied into one another, isn't it? A busy weekend for the match review panel, who have sat this morning and released their findings for everyone to slag off on social media, because that is what people do. Great line from Jamie Peacock about the people you can't argue with and win. Teenage daughters don't have one. Referees, you were one. You can't argue with referees, can you? Because they're not going to change. You're not going to change your mind, are you? Once you've decided that some player's done something naughty. Referees
have been known to change their mind, but only as a result of information coming from a touch judge or a video referee.
Not a player.
Never from a player. So that's everybody knows that, but does it still go on? Yeah, it does, as we saw on Saturday.
But how many forward passes did you give on the advice of the sound stand? That's the
they would suggest plenty against the opposition and maybe never against. I don't know.
Josh Griffin, without being flippant, other contrary behaviour, which you understand from the way it's been worded, is calling into account the impartiality of a match official, which you can't do.
Yeah, he's questioned his integrity, and that's what the minutes say, isn't it? And there is no safer guarantee for a player to be red carded than to question the integrity of a referee.
But what was bizarre being there was, firstly, it was after the hooter had gone for half time, and originally he's given a yellow card, so clearly he's gone over there, let his feelings be known, clearly got no change, but there's no play going on. Yeah. So to then go back and get that yellow turned into a red, there can only be one person culpable for that. Yeah, and that is the player themselves. And the shame is that he again was probably arguably maybe Texoy Hull's best player in that opening 40 minutes, and we have seen, particularly this weekend, that having 12 players doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose. In fact, there's one team that did remarkably well.
Well, we've talked about that before. We talked about Leeds Rhinos the other week, didn't we?
It did cost his team the game.
Yeah, I mean, I will go back just because I've said this on record before around particular incidents in games. Hull was still capable of winning that game, as we saw at the weekend. Yeah. Wigan played 74 minutes with 12 men. Yeah. Leeds at Wigan a few weeks ago won with 12 men. So it can happen. It does happen. So to blame Josh Griffin, in my opinion, is wrong. Did it have an influence on the outcome? Without doubt.
Yeah. The only thing with that is that, again, watching the way St Helens... See, the thing about Warrington not winning with 12 men is that they didn't play very well. They didn't exploit that. what St Helens did was they hit where Hull were weakest, and they actually won the game in the third quarter when they got 2 tries, hitting the areas roughly where Josh Griffin would have been defended. So it's not necessarily that you're playing with or without an extra player, it's how you exploit that, and St Helens were good enough to do that.
Agreed, and look, don't get me wrong, it makes it so much more difficult to defend when you've got 12 as opposed to 13, but it has been done before. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of points I would make on this, is that, you know, people will say, oh, well, they'll go back to the decision, was the decision right or wrong to penalise for the ball steal? Well, I would just say irrelevant. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter whether it was right or wrong. I don't think the video evidence is conclusive in either way, to be honest. So, but it's immaterial. A decision has been given that a player does not like. I've given decisions. You've seen lots of examples where decisions are being given that are actually correct, and the player still doesn't like it, and then will object. Now, the hooter's now gone, so you can't then blow a penalty. So that option's taken away from him. Josh Griffin sought the referee out. He went to him. He initiated the discussion, even if it was a one-sided discussion. And he was given a yellow card, and that would have been the end of it.
That should have been the end.
Yeah.
I mean, again, if you're a slightly hot-headed teenage player just making your way in the game, but you know, Josh has been Hull's best player for the last 2 or 3 weeks. He had a huge impact in that first half, but he's a very experienced player. I don't know why he had to go back a second. You know, if he got the yellow card and he'd spent the first 10 minutes on the sidelines, he's already harming his team. What on earth possesses you when you're an experienced guy?
He just lost the plot. He lost the plot, and you know, he won't be the first, and he isn't the first, and he won't be the last. But no doubt behind the scenes, it was interesting at the half-time, showing the camera in the dressing room of Gareth Ellis and Jason Davison, I think more or less informing Tony Smith, who's probably missed it, what's happened. And that must have been a bit of a bombshell for Tony Smith. But
Tony was great in the press conference.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that some profanities have been said. I don't know the detail of it, but I trust the referee wouldn't send anyone off without a good reason, so we'll just have to wear it.
Yeah. And you can't say fairer than that.
Hats off.
And, you know, yeah, look, I think you could see again on that camera, because they showed in the second half, didn't they, when Saints had started to score, Griffin in the dressing room with presumably his partner and child. And, you know, he looked upset, and understandably, you know, I'm sure he will have learned a huge lesson. The club will have learned a lesson from it in terms of the wider team. But, you know, for people to then go on social media and to blame the referee is just utter dross and madness. I mean, even I got a message direct on my Instagram. Somebody chose to message me on my Instagram to basically almost ask for Chris Kendall's telephone number in order so he could then abuse him. I mean, it's just utterly absurd.
But what does a club have a responsibility to step in and say, look, you're representing us as a fan of this club, we're not standing for it, you're going to be, you have your season ticket revoked for the remainder of this season, or you're not going to be welcome at the, because we have to do something.
Yeah, arguably yes. I mean, the difficulty is with some accounts, some people don't want to put the names to them. No. But I was always amazed when, like this person did at the weekend, was quite happy to put their name to something to then abuse the recipient of it. And I had death threats through social media directed from people who were prepared to put their names to it, and police investigated it and attended the person that had done it. So, I mean, you know, it beggars belief that actually some people will be prepared to put their name to it, you know. But it's just twisted. It's a twisted mentality that you seek to blame the referee for a player that has just abused the referee. And now clearly people don't know what was said. Now we understand it's questioning the integrity. But actually, should it matter?
No.
You know, you can have an opinion on Chris Kendall. You can have an opinion on any referee, whether you like them or dislike them, whether you agree with the decision or otherwise. But I just fail to see why you somehow support a player who's clearly spoken to the referee in a completely and utterly inappropriate manner. The referee's tried one direction, it's failed, and he's chosen to continue it
twice. That's the thing that is even more unfathomable.
I mean, I'd go the complete opposite way and to say I think Chris Kendall did an absolute service to the game, live on the BBC, where you've got a player giving the referee a spray. We now know it's questioning his integrity, and actually Chris, instead of choosing to ignore it, that happens in other sports, which people generally
or
do
play
not
it
like.
down. Could have left it as a yellow.
Yeah, he chose to deal with it entirely correctly, and for me, should be supported on it.
The other thing as well is that if found guilty with it being a grade F offence, it would be a minimum 6-week ban.
Yeah,
that's going to leave Hull again in short-handed at a time in the season now where it's really important for them to try and go on a run to try and make the 6.
absolutely.
So it's just one of the most crass things I've ever seen.
And then you get into the realms of, well, how does that compare to somebody who's thrown somebody and landed on the head? And they're just different. You can't compare apples and oranges. They are different. One, is one worse than the other? Well, that's for the match review panel to decide, and that's ultimately then for the RFL disciplinary to determine. But is it right that a player questions the integrity of a match official? Absolutely not.
Well, we've also seen, as we predicted last week, that Josh Maguire got his hefty ban and is on a plane out of the country, which I think that's the right way that has been handled. And I know there's some people saying, oh well, the evidence was, some of it was redacted. And the fact that the player and Warrington didn't appeal it tells us everything we need to know. He knew that would most likely be the end of his full-time professional career. But I don't think we've ever had a weekend of 4 quarter-finals where 3 of them have had a man sent off.
No.
I can't think of another time where that would have happened.
But I think that's
all for very different offences.
I think it shows a reflection of the intensity of the games to some degree. The pressure that perhaps players feel they're under, the pressure to get a result within the 80 minutes because they're a stepping stone away from Wembley. I think maybe that puts an added pressure on players and makes them do things that they perhaps wouldn't do on another day.
And 2 of the 3 are just bizarre in terms of the player themselves has tried to take the law as they see it into their own hand. The third one, which will also carry a very hefty fine, is purely terrible technique.
I mean, what was Kai O'Donnell? He
somebody who has
away.
Been a great player so far this season.
And it can go wrong. Tackles can go wrong. He's not intentionally spear tackled him. It's a tackle that's gone wrong. It's reckless. Is it deliberate? Well, no, I would say it's not. But that still doesn't mean it's not a red card. It's a completely, utterly reckless tackle. Once he raises that, cocks that sort of elbow up, he's there's only the player in possession is only ending up in one direction really, and he recognised himself, the player, didn't he, O'Donnell, that he'd got it wrong, and he really knew the outcome before the referee even got the card out of the pocket. And
Cade Ellis is one I don't understand either. And early stage of the game, 6 minutes in, high intensity, season potentially on the line for him because his contract's up at the end of the year. Lead with your head can only lead to one course of action. Yeah, again,
we saw it in the grand final a few years ago, didn't we, when Wigan played St Helens and all that build up and Ben Flower and very early in a game where players are sort of pumped up and they've come out of the dressing room and all that. But again, it was a nothing situation, and then Ellis goes and seeks Ratchford out, the sort of push, and then it ends up in that. It's just, I mean, if you're a coach, he's an absolute coach killer. Ultimately, it didn't affect the result for Wigan, but people would have then pointed the finger at Cade Ellis had Wigan gone on and lost that game. So, yeah, I mean, he's gonna face a few games in terms of a ban as well. 3 matches as grade D, didn't he? Yeah.
And gave up a goal line dropout. They got a goal line dropout from it, and to go lay their head on Stefan Ratchford. Bizarre. Just back to Josh Griffin for a moment. We obviously just mentioned the other Josh and Josh Maguire. He didn't learn from his initial incident, which meant that he got a second longer ban. This will be the first one for Josh, and as well as the lengthy ban we're expecting, you'd also expect then some kind of education programme in there as well, as Maguire got earlier in the season. But what's going to go? Did they get him on the line at a game or something? I
don't know whether in those situations they do put players on a course. They may do. I'm not sure. But I don't know what the reaction was post game. I did a game once at Hull FC where the stewards, basically, the head steward, the ground safety team, advised me it was unsafe for me to leave the stadium, and I had to have my car driven inside the bowl, stadium bowl, to get out, and that's the standard policy at the ground when they host a football game for referees. I physically couldn't leave the ground; it was unsafe, and that's not the first occasion that's happened. I know that happened with Ian Smith at that same ground. Is it acceptable? No, it's not. It's totally unacceptable, irrespective of a referee's performance. I may have performed badly on that day, but actually really shouldn't matter.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to the football issue at the moment with disaster chanting, which is a terrible name for something that's been going on for 40, 50, 60 years. When was the Munich air disaster? So 58, so going back to at least then. And you can't tell me that in 2023 football clubs don't have the technology to be able to point out the people in their grounds who are chanting about this and that and the other various thing. I'm not saying that every rugby league ground has the technology to do the same, but you'd be able to pick out or have an idea of who is, and especially on social media, abusing people, not just match officials but opposition players, and ban them and set an example and say, look, we're not having it.
And there was an example on social media, I think a couple of weeks ago, with Anthony Taylor, a football referee that had gone to referee, was it the
Roma?
The Europa
League final, that's right. And he was travelling through the airport with I presume his wife and his daughter, and they were verbally abused, and then somebody chose to launch a chair towards them, and rightly so. People were horrified on social media. Was that because it wasn't any English teams involved?
No, it's because
was it just
Mourinho
and who will get any punishment?
But which is why I think Tony Smith should be commended for, without even knowing the facts of exactly what's happened, immediately went into a press conference and couldn't and wouldn't support his player.
By the way, I would say this thing, in terms of social media, I suppose we shouldn't get carried away with those people. There were a lot of people on social media, by the way, sort of bagging Chris Kendall and the situation, but I still maintain that the majority of people in rugby league would support the referee's actions and would support the strong handling of dissent.
Yeah.
Nobody in rugby league, or I would say the majority of people that watch rugby league, don't want to see it go down the avenue of football. And it's often the minority, isn't it, in any social situation. Those that sort of shout the loudest get heard.
Kevin, he's got a bit Josh Griffin. He says, "Sounds gone, lads," and they say, "Sorry, it was me." Well, cheers, Kevin. There were some shocking tackles at the Lee York game, says Kevin. Not only the man who was sent off, but Zach Hardaker here performing some kind of manoeuvre on AJ Towns. Not quite sure what. He only got a yellow card though, so he's okay. And Les saying, "How did Lee not have 3 sent off?"
I didn't watch that game, but Hardaker got a grade C, and then Teamby from York got a grade C, and Tom Nisbet from Lee got a grade C, with O'Donnell getting a D.
I think Nisbet's got a couple of games, hasn't he? The others got fines.
The only thing I saw from that game was the O'Donnell tackle.